Hey YouTube, Matt here with MS Performance. If you saw the last video, you saw that we converted my B6 S4 to rear wheel drive. Today we are going to take it a step farther and we are going to weld the rear diff now to get both tires spinning. So I'm going to go through, weld all these teeth together, get some weld in the middle connecting everything together so nothing can turn like this, and then we'll pull the car in the garage, take out the diff that's in there, throw this one in. This is a spare diff that I have, and then we will go take it for a test drive and see how it works. Now I will say, this isn't a how-to video. I'm not a mechanic. If you want to do this to your car, that's on you. Do it at your own risk. Welding the diff does cause some drivability issues, but being that this car will end up being a drift car for this summer, this is something that's a necessity to do. So here we go. Alright guys, so we got the diff all welded up. We got the car pulled in, jacked up, set on jack stands. First thing we're going to be doing is this drain plug right here. Drain out all the old fluid. And then we have to take this shield off, undo the axles to get at the bolts that are in the cups. And then after we get those undone, we can take out these bolts that go around, and we should be able to slide the old diff out through the side here and slide the new one in. So let's get started with that. Break it loose with the impact. Do the rest by hand. Got my pan underneath it. Try to keep the gear oil off you, because if you've worked on cars at all, you know gear oil smells horrible. But while that's draining, I'm going to work on getting these covers off. That would be a 6mm Allen. There's 3 bolts on each. Both need to come off. We shouldn't have to take the axle completely out. We should be able to just unbolt it from the diff and then let it kind of hang down, and it should be out of the way enough. This side for sure will be out of the way enough because we don't have to take anything else off over there. We just have to get to the one bolt on the inside of the flange for the axle to be able to take the diff out. I am just going to give them a couple quick turns back into the hole that they came in from, or came out of rather, so they don't get lost. Now, getting this rear diff welded up will definitely be a good start to getting the car ready for drift season. This will be my first season drifting, so I'm hoping that it goes all right and have some fun. I do have a racing simulator from SimMagic that I have ordered on Black Friday. It is now just past the new year. That should be coming in a couple weeks. So you guys let me know in the comments if you want me to do a couple videos on setting that up, getting some tracks and doing a little drifting on there. I know this is not your ordinary go-to drift car, but it's a opportunity for me to get into drifting, something I've wanted to do for a long time. Film videos about it, also something I've wanted to do for a while. And it's a car that I already had, so I don't have to go out and trying to find a 240 or a 350Z or a 335i. All great drift cars, great starter cars. I already had this car. It was sitting in my driveway. I don't use it much. So I figured, I know rear wheel drive swapping is relatively easy. The diff is relatively easy to get to. I know the car fairly well. It's a 4.2 liter V8 with a 6-speed manual, so I should have plenty of power to start out with. Alright, now we will move on to taking the axles off. That is an M10 triple square. Now I will have to go, after I break some of these loose, I will have to go take the handbrake off, or the parking brake off, rotate it to get the other ones on the top, and reset the handbrake so that I can break them loose. It looks like our oil is pretty well drained out. I'm going to leave the drain pan here for when I take this cover off. There might be some residual oil in there. But I am going to do both side axles while it's down here. And then we will rotate the wheels to get the other ones. Now these axles might be a little bit stuck on the cup, so you might have to take a dead blow hammer and tap on them a little bit to get them to come off. You should try not to do that. Drop my ratchet in the gear oil. Grab some rags for my ratchet that I dropped. Lovely. I will say though, these Sonic tools, I got one of their sample kits, and it is by far my favorite ratchet. Their tool quality is just super nice. I have it in the works to hopefully get a toolbox. You can buy their toolboxes with the whole tools already in it, foam liners and everything. This is going to be a little bit of a pain to get out. Might have to throw the jack underneath this A-arm, lift this suspension up to get it to sit more flat so it can drop out. As you can see, it kind of recessed into the cup. So we'll have to jack up on this control arm, get the suspension compressed so that the axle sits a little bit more straight and it should flop down. But first I'm going to go back, undo the parking brake, rotate it a little bit more to get that one, or the last two on that axle. Alright, jacked up on the control arms, got the axle straight, and I was able to pop them back out a little bit. So now there's a 6mm Allen up inside this cup. Can't really move the camera that far, the battery's almost dead on it. I had to plug it in. Well, maybe I can. I'll show you when it's out. So we gotta take those two bolts out. Those are a 6mm Allen. There we go. One of the bolts. Set that off to the side. Slide you guys out of the way. We will have one more on this side. Now, if you don't have an impact, you can still get these out. You just have to hold the other side cup so it don't spin. You could probably take two of these bolts, thread them back in, put a pry bar in there on the one side, break it loose, then flip them and do it on the other side, and then take the bolts all the way out. Now we can slide that cup out. You can see it's got a tapered seat on the inside to match the bolt. Splines that go into the diff. Seal surface. Set that one off to the side. We are going to try to keep them on the same side they came off of. I'm going to check out the seal. It looks like it's still in really good shape. Alright. I just jacked up right off the tire just to get this suspension compressed compared to the other side that's decompressed, and that straightens out the axle angle so that way now it's sitting out of the way. We can pull this cup right out. Now, there's a little lip here. I'm going to take my dead blow and, you know, this long 8mm Allen, just give it some taps. Like that. Just like that. This cover comes off. You drop it in the oil just to make sure. We've been waiting for. The diff. There she is. Alright, now we got our welded diff. Ready to go back in. Make sure you clean it off. There's no slag on it. Bearings all look good. If it's got any slag on anything, take a little bit of emery cloth or real high grit sandpaper to it. Get it cleaned up so you don't have issues down the road. Chipped all the slag off. Now we should be able to take it. Throw the cover back on. Make sure your 3 bolts for your axle shields are on the bottom where they were. Make sure your O-ring's in good shape. These ones are sealed by an O-ring, so you don't need a gasket. I would recommend replacing them as a good practice. If you take the O-ring off, take the seals up, and replace those. I, however, am not going to. Simply because I don't have one. Alright, so I realized I did something wrong. The bolts holding the cup in, I tightened them down fairly tight. They are only supposed to be tightened to 18 foot-pounds. So that put too much preload on the bearing, so it will not rotate. It's very tight and it's not ideal. So I have to go through and take the axles back out, loosen up those bolts, retorque them down to 18 foot-pounds, and then put everything back together. So just a disclaimer, make sure when you're dealing with bearings, you always tighten them down to the torque spec so that you don't overload the bearing and have issues. The car technically would drive like this, but it would be very bad for those bearings, and I would be having to do this again, pulling it out, replacing the diff bearings, and that's not a good time. Like I said, we want to have a fun time. We want to learn. It slipped my mind that I would be putting preload on the bearings, and should have looked up the torque spec to begin with. So I am going to fast forward through this, and when I come back, we'll continue on after the axles are all back in.